to the cops out there doing it every day, keep doing what you're doing. Life can change on you in a split second. Don't take it for granted. All right, welcome to another episode of Talking Filthy Police Podcast, sponsored by Filthy Pirate Coffee. This show's a little bit different today. I'm here with my co-host, Kurt, the running man, Dab. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. Doing all right. You?
I'm doing all right. All right. It's part of the fun of this thing. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough few months in Tucson, with the shooting and killing of a paramedic and firefighters, large-scale incident back in July, I think that was. And then yesterday down at the Amtrak station here in Tucson. For our listeners that are not in the U.S., I know we have some that are outside the U.S., and then the ones that are not here. We're real close to home. Both Kurt and I know many of the people involved in that incident yesterday. None of them told us any details about it. I think Kurt and I have done this job long enough to kind of pick the pieces and put together a picture of kind of what happened. And we're not here to debrief what happened yesterday at all. That's a job for the professionals. What we wanted to do is just take a few minutes, kind of talk about the things that we have experienced in large-scale incidents. Kurt's been involved in the January 8th Gabby Giffords incident where she was shot and wounded, and several other people were shot and wounded and killed. Very tragic incidents, and I think those are different. And they're different from a regular officer-involved shooting because obviously yesterday we lost a fellow law enforcement officer. A DEA agent, a special agent, was killed in the line of duty while dealing with these people. Another one was seriously injured, and then a Tucson police officer was also injured. And they're both on the road to recovery, but they're still not out of the woods yet and all of that. This investigation is probably going to be long-term. It's a big one, right? There's federal agencies involved. There's the death of an officer involved. It's on a federal regulated train station. It was inside of a train, my understanding. Parts of it. I think some of it took place outside of the train. I don't know. But anyway, it's on federal property, train. We all know since post 9/11, federal travel systems are really, really touchy and sensitive to these types of things. So there's a lot of stress, I'm sure, and I know when I'm watching a lot of my friends post things and say things. I talked to one of the investigators last night, just said, hey man, I know you're probably on this thing and you've had a hell of a summer with the homicide rate in Tucson skyrocketing and these major events, and I'm just worried about how you're doing and how you're feeling. And so he sounded upbeat, but I think there's a quick thing that Kurt and I can kind of talk about is just how, in the days after, how do you manage that stress? Whether you were there as a witness, whether you were directly involved, whether you put your eyes on a fellow fallen brother or sister, how do you work through that? And then dealing with the stress of a large investigation. There's a lot of pressure involved. There's multiple federal agencies involved in this. There's a lot of critiquing and feedbacking and figuring out what happened, and outside of the regular criminal investigation, there's the admin side of this thing. So there's a ton of pressure for everyone. So Kurt, you've give us a little feeling of what that was like for you in the days. I know we talked about it before in a previous episode. The Gabby Giffords incident was like a week long. You were up there. What kind of stress is going on there?
Well, first of all, Dan, I just want to pass on our gratitude, to the officers that were there yesterday and the TPD officers that responded and everybody else to this, tragic incident. It breaks my heart every time a cop dies, whether it's at the hands of a bad guy or at the hands of themselves. And I know thoughts and prayers don't mean a whole hell of a lot, but we really, really appreciate, what they all did.
I think that's a great point before you dive into the stress stuff. While we talked about the tragedy and we talked about the stresses, I do suspect, and I do have some inkling that there was some really heroic actions taken yesterday. The difference between life and death for more people, and there were people on that train, my understanding, somewhere. There was, according to the chief of police who put it out yesterday, at least a dozen
137
total. Yeah.
civilians. Yeah.
So, if you can picture a gunfight going on what they call a tubular structure, tight
Confined
quarters.
space.
Yeah, just crazy, insane. So my hats off to those ladies and gentlemen that did that. I'm very proud of them. I know that I had a direct influence in helping them train and prepare for that incident, and so I know in my previous interactions with them, I know they were prepared for today or yesterday.
Yeah.
I know they were prepared for it, and we're going to help them get prepared for tomorrow. But
Yes.
yeah, so my hats off to you guys. Thoughts and prayers to the lost the lost DEA agents, family members, to them, their brothers and sisters at the DEA, all the cops that were there, and the ones that are injured. No doubt about it. I don't even know how, I think that's just kind of the thing that people say, but really, I think it really hits home for us. We're here, right
Yeah.
in the mix of this thing, and we know people that were on that train. We know, we work closely with them. So, yeah.
So yeah, with with an investigation like that, you have to think really big, right, from a 1,000-foot level looking down. Like you said, you have a federally regulated train track. You have a federally um, subsidized train in Amtrak. You have federal agents. You have state, county, and other agents that were part of that task force, and it is a daunting task. And you have to think of it from two aspects, right? You have the the trauma that the officers and special agents that were involved in the shooting in and of itself, and you have the issues that the investigators are going to be facing, because it's a multi-pronged, multifaceted investigation. You're going to have a number of three-letter federal agencies getting their hands dirty in this investigation, and it's not simply going to stop on the train. They're going to go back and they're going to dig into these two individuals' past, whatever intel they may or may not have had on them before. All of that is going to lead to a huge, large scale, could possibly be a nationwide investigation.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point, because the train started from somewhere, and the train stopped in Tucson. I'm assuming, I don't know, and it was, my understanding, was headed to Louisiana, I believe. And so you got all that space where this thing stopped, and midway point. So great point. Yeah, this thing is huge. Yeah.
so yeah, being involved in the Gabby Giffords shooting on January 8th, I was in the homicide unit at the time, and I ended up being a liaison between the FBI and the sheriff's department, which handled that investigation. And talk about stress, and that's what we're talking about today, is how to manage that stress. And you're under the microscope, and that microscope is going to be very, very focused on everything that everybody does. When you're conducting, an investigation like this, a homicide investigation, you always strive to do your best. But when it's one of your own, you always want to give it that little extra effort to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And it can be very challenging, for the investigator and the officers that are involved, because it's such a lengthy, detailed process. And you mentioned about the criminal investigation and an administrative investigation. They're two different animals looking at two different facets of the incident, and that in and of itself can just be uber stressful.
These things are really hard. I know from my own personal experience, and you too, that self-reflection during an incident where we apply force or we apply deadly force, and it seems like the more force and the more injury and or death is involved, the more self-reflection comes into play. The more,
Yeah.
I don't hammer myself as hard when I do a takedown as versus when I really look at how I got involved in a shooting. I think most cops are geared that way. And then
Yep.
you take these situations, and you take the death of one agent, the injury of two other officers and agents, into play, and man, it's real hard. Everything gets looked at. Everything that was said, done, from start to finish gets looked at, and it's a ton of stress, right? It's
Yep.
this: am I going to look like a damn fool? Did I do something? Maybe the ones really closely involved. Did I do something to facilitate this incident? Even though you may be, the common person would look at it and go, you were so far removed from at that moment right there that it's not your fault. But cops tend to feel like that
We
maybe
second guess ourselves.
right. What should I have been here? Should I have went left? Should I have been looking that way? Should I have done this? And this goes on for days, if not months after, maybe even in some cases, depending on how someone's dealing with it, years.
Yeah.
How did we get to this point? And
Yeah.
so that part is really, really hard. It's a lot of, thousands of pages of everything we did, as law enforcement, and everyone, the whole world right now, because this is an international incident that, went big, can see this, right? And so that's a lot of stress.
Yeah. And it's all fine and dandy to, sit here and talk about how we have dealt with these types of situations in the past. We're not mental health professionals. All we can do is speak from our experiences. And I think the biggest thing that helped me is just talking to somebody. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It doesn't have to be a counselor. It doesn't have to be EAP or a department psychologist or psychiatrist. As long as you're having conversations about it and allowing yourself to go through that 7-stage grieving process, I think that is, one of the biggest things that I learned, but it took me an awful long time to learn that, to talk about these things and get them in the open instead of letting them compartmentalize in the back of your brain and just pushing it aside. This is an extremely traumatic event that needs, an extremely humble person to open up and talk about how they're feeling, whether it's with one of the guys that was there at the scene or with you at one of your scenes or what have you. You've got to talk about it. And I'm not saying talk about it ad nauseum, but within those first couple of days, you may not want to talk about it at all. But, it was a big thing that helped me is just talking about it to somebody that would listen.
Yeah, and I think too, on a few things that I've been on, it's so hard to talk. You want to talk with someone, but then you're concerned that I might talk about details of the investigation, and since there's, for lack of a better term, a gag order on everybody involved.
Yeah.
For the right reasons, it's a good thing. I do believe that in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
How do we have a conversation about this thing? And it's more of a, hey, I feel like shit, man. How do you feel? Well, I feel like shit too, and that's about as far as it goes. But I do think outside, where you can talk to someone and just kind of get your feelings out in the open, and maybe you're pissed off. I would be angry at first, looking down at a dead brother, because that is like, I don't know. That's just the single most thing that I can think of that can be tragic in that job. That it's off limits. We don't want it to happen. And so maybe you're angry about it and you need to vent a little bit. So that's a hard thing to. I agree with you. Get out there and talk when you're ready. Within the perspective
Confines
time.
of the investigation. Yeah. But yeah, and anger is one of the steps of the grieving process. You have the right to be angry. You can be angry at the bad guy. You can be angry at yourself. You can be angry at whoever the hell you want to be. That's a normal reaction. And if it is just talking to someone and saying, I feel like shit today, man. I slept like shit. I didn't go to the gym, today, which is a normal routine. And that's one of the things. We all have our routines, right? We all get, I don't know about you. I'm assuming it's the same way. I have all my shit where I need it in the morning. I go over there and I grab it. Everything's where it's supposed to be. I put my boots on the same way, my pants, my shirt, all that stuff. So stick with your routine, but just reach out and talk, because keeping that shit built up inside, that anger and sadness and is not good. It'll eat at you. I'm living proof. You're living proof. many of the people that we speak with have been through, traumatic situations that have been affected, adversely. And um, it takes it takes a lot to come forward, but the biggest thing is just to talk to somebody.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And maybe you're uncomfortable talking to, peer support, from the agency or whatever. Maybe you just don't want to. But I do believe that talking to someone, and hey, if and I'll throw this out there for any listener that was involved. If you were there and you're struggling with this thing, or maybe you're close to someone that was there, maybe you're close to the lost EA agent. You want to come have a cup of coffee and just vent. I've got my own gag order. I don't talk about anything you say at my coffee shop. If I'm not available, I'll throw keys to Kurt. Come see Kurt. I'm kind of throwing you out there, bud. But I'd rather have you come have a cup of coffee with me, get it off your shoulders. I don't work for a police department. I don't owe anybody shit. I owe it to the cops. That's who I owe. And I think it's important. Maybe we are good sounding boards for people. We've been there, done that. We know what it's like. We also been there, done that, and didn't speak
Yeah.
sometimes, and when we should have, and now we know what that's like. So I think, on to Kurt's point, which is extremely valuable, I think it is one of the most important. Outside of do something physical right now, like if you were there at that train station yesterday, today, tomorrow, the next few days, get out, do something physical. Go to the gym, go for a walk, go play with the dogs at the park. Get out, get some fresh air. I'm telling you, hands down, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing negative about that. Get out, get some fresh air, even if it's just by yourself at the park, where maybe it's a small park that not many people are at because you're having anxiety about being around a lot of people. That's cool. Fresh air and physical fitness are really important. I think the other part, going back to my point, was talking to someone. Just a little bit, get it off your chest a little bit, um, and it's okay. And if you're that person that someone is talking to, just listen. That's all. Listen and understand that they're going through something that most people in their lives don't go through once, maybe in their entire lives, and cops go through this shit 25 times in varying degrees of seriousness. So it's pretty heavy. So talk to someone, get out there, do some physical fitness. Going back to like kind of what we talked about, don't beat yourself up. It is what it is. You could have went left, should have went right, and I use that just kind of vaguely. It is what it is, man. We have some very well trained police officers in this country. We have some very well trained officers in this city, and they do a great job every day. It's hard to do this job. It's very dynamic. I don't think I've ever done a training scenario in my law enforcement career outside of SWAT where it was gunfights in a train. So that's just not a normal thing that cops train, and so I'm quite sure that everyone handled themselves accordingly. Don't beat yourselves up over this thing too much if you were involved on things. It is what it is, and you're going to go your whole life wondering, should I have done that? Was I there? Should I have done this, that, the other? And that's okay, too, to wonder a little bit, but don't let it get out of control. That happened
Yeah.
to me, and it got spun out of control real hard for a while. But so,
I, I think another thing, that is very important, you and I have both done this job for over 20 years, and who are who are the silent warriors? They're our family, they're our spouses, they're our kids. They endure the shit that we endure in a different way because we come home, we're quiet, we're displaced, we're not present. We may become angry. Um, so, if you're going to talk to anybody, make sure you keep your wife or your husband and your kids aware of what's going on because they do literally go through hell for us by supporting us, and they will be your biggest support system, my belief.
yeah, I agree with that. I wish I didn't wait till 19 years, 20 years on to really start
Right.
sharing the job with my wife because she was so understanding about everything and wasn't judgmental about it. In fact, this is a true story. I just told her last night about a time a good friend of mine who's in California and he left the agency about 10 years ago. We worked together on the south side for many years and we were just two knuckleheads going after it, and um, I truly believe this. We were looking for a bad guy. He was hiding on me. He caught me slipping and he was grabbing a gun out of a car and my buddy happened to be behind him. He didn't see my buddy. My buddy ended up using force on him and taking him down and stuff. And point to that was I never told my wife that story because
Wow.
I should be dead. You know what I mean? And I think every cop has probably had that experience to some degree, and or feeling, like God, man, that was a close one. And I shared that story. She's like, "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" I was like, "Well, I don't want you to worry." She's like, "You smashed down narcotics warrants, 2 and 3 a night through the front door. Why would I? What would be any different?" I was like, "Fair point. I could have been just killed just as easily coming through the door, or on a DV call, like just a standard patrol, that seems to get a lot of patrol cops, is because you can't prepare for that ambush. And so anyway, Kurt's got a great
Was
point.
there
Share that with
was
your
there any other
spouse.
reason? Was there any other reason why you didn't share that with her other
You,
than
you know,
just
yeah, yeah. Now that I'm a lot older and wiser and more humble, I was embarrassed. I got caught
yeah,
slipping. Yeah, I assured my family, that I'm this superhero badass every day because I wanted them to feel confident that I'm going out there doing all this crazy shit, whether it was undercover deals or whatever.
right.
But the truth is, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed at myself too. I got caught slipping, and it was funny because I told her I never missed looking in a car ever again, going to anything. Every car window I looked. So it taught me a life lesson, to look back and see my buddy actually pistol whipping this guy in the head because he saw him pulling the handgun out of the truck as he was basically sneaking out of the truck. And he was a violent home invader. That's why we were out there looking for him. We were watching his place and all that kind of stuff. And I was in full uniform, so he was completely okay with killing a uniformed patrol cop. And so
Yeah.
that's his mentality. He ended up getting killed. He ended up getting murdered on a party shootout several months later. So karma's a bitch for that
No, imagine
term. But
that.
yeah,
But I think that's an important. I think that's important, Dan. Is you felt embarrassed about something that you did because you confided in your family and portrayed yourself as this superhuman. And that's exactly what these guys and girls that were involved with this incident yesterday. They're going to feel that way too. So I think that's super important to that you recognized it, although it may have been you know not something that you wanted to share, but man, fuck, dude, we can't be perfect, and
yeah,
we've all made mistakes, and it's important to keep those communication channels open with our families, and that's they can't give us the support and the love and the caring that we need because you needed it at that time. You felt like shit because you were embarrassed about letting your guard down or whatever, be caught slipping. I got caught slipping too on one of mine, and it was not a good feeling, but it's important to share those things. And
100%. One thing I would change about my career is involving my wife in those discussions of where I'm at. We could talk about this later on, but I think the relevance to this situation was I never shared. I had lost a child in a vehicle collision where I had rolled up on it, and the child was in bad shape. It affected me so bad for the next few days because my kids were that same age. They were just little toddlers, and this was a 2-year-old. But I never shared that, and so where I'm going with that point is what you're feeling right now. You can help yourself a lot if you share it with a family member, spouse, somebody close to you, as well as somebody maybe outside And maybe it's both, in different capacities. Share that with them because they are probably a lot more understanding, a lot more um, willing to help you if you just share that part.
Because they only know what we tell them,
Right.
right? If you tell them you're okay all the time and nothing bad happened, I didn't get hurt, then you're doing them and yourself a disservice. Um, so yeah,
100%. Yeah. And you're setting them up for when you actually do potentially get hurt. I mean, even just, a broken leg or something serious, you're setting them up for something even more challenging down the road. So they have to understand the full facet of the job. If your spouse is not a law enforcement or doesn't come from law enforcement family, that it's going to be really important for you to kind of share that stuff. So, again, when it's appropriate time, make sure you can kind of spend the time with the family and kind of explain what happened and what was going on. And don't be like me and let some jackass friend tell my daughter how many shootings I've been involved in before I ever got a chance to have that conversation with her, and my daughter's looking at me, wait, what? You shot people? That's a heavy thing, man. That's a real heavy thing. So we digressed a little bit, but I think our point was to this, physical fitness of some kind the next few days. Talk with someone.
eat food.
Eat, and try to rest. It's going to be real hard. Close your eyes. Maybe initially you could crash out, but after in the days preceding that, sometimes it's a lot of stress, especially when you're getting called back in for more interviews and more things and more
A
stuff.
walkthrough.
Training
Yeah.
elements, and all these different things. It's going to be real challenging to go through that. For the cops that weren't there at that incident, but have, like us, their close ties with these people, it sucks. I know of several friends that worked with the lost. So several people that I know that agent that was killed yesterday. They worked with him. That's huge, right? That's a huge impact. Same thing applies, man. Just because you weren't in the thick of things and the smoke, and on the train, you still need to kind of vent because it maybe in some ways, in a different way, just as bad as someone being on that train that didn't know him, didn't work with him, that just responded to the call. Tragic and ugly, and it's also tragic and ugly for someone who knew him but wasn't on the train, and now he's gone from their lives. And so I think the same things, and we're not doctors, we're just saying from our experience, these are things that may help you for sure. To get out, get some air, get some physical action, eat, take care of yourself, share what you can with your spouse and your significant other and your family when it's appropriate. Find a peer, another cop if you can that knows. Share a little bit with them how you're feeling, not the incident, but how you're feeling, how you're going to work through this. Ask some questions. Am I supposed to feel like this? Am I supposed to feel like, I do remember like a couple days later after my first shooting, I just felt foggy. Like, what the hell just happened? Where's my life going? And, what just happened and what, that kind of thing. So, I think it's good to talk about that stuff and get it out in the open and work with someone that's a veteran. So if you can, I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
So to kind of wrap up this session, Kurt and I, again, hats off to everyone that was on that train doing whatever they could to stop the madness. Our thoughts and prayers are with the lost DEA agent and the injured DEA agent and TPD officer and their families and friends. I know the injured TPD officer well, and so it does impact me. I don't know the two DEA agents off the top of my head. I don't even know who the person was injured, so it could be somebody I know, the DEA agent, but I didn't know the deceased DEA agent. I may have worked with him in passing, but I just don't know him by name. But it doesn't matter. He wore a badge. They all wore badges. They were all doing the same things that every cop goes out there to do, and it's your job. And and all these people saying the blue line and all that shit is bad. I just have to say you're wrong, because this was the blue line right there. That was the difference between 137 people on that train being injured or killed, the train, being taken over by bad guys. Who knows what their motives or what they were involved in. if you're willing to shoot police officers on a train, what else are you willing to do? So yeah, that is evil, in my opinion. And yeah, there is a blue line, and it's not the code of silence; it's the code of protection. And so I believe that. I really do.
Absolutely.
I say to those that hate the blue line, well, tough shit, because it worked on the train and they did their jobs. And so I kind of digressed there a little bit. I feel very strongly about that.
Well, you're look, you weren't even there, bro. You know a lot of the individuals that were involved, so it's not uncommon, right, for you to have these feelings, this feeling of anger, like what the fuck, you know. Whatever it was a simple investigation, and now we've got 3 cops shot and one of them is killed, and I'm pissed off, and I know you're pissed off, and that's good, Dan.
I
It's
think
normal.
I think two things to think about too. Just kind of on a side note, I thought the trains were considered in that TSA world of security the same as planes, meaning like you had to go.
Right?
I'm so I would I actually am. I'd like to do some research and find out how do you get on a train with a gun, and so forth. Is there no? I don't know. I've never been on a train, so I don't know. Other than
So I read an article yesterday on the news, obviously, and they were speaking with a former Amtrak conductor, who said, quote unquote, I would never send my family on an Amtrak train. And he went on to explain that they don't have the safety protocols like
clearly
TSA has in. There's no screening, there's no searching, there's no metal detectors, there's nothing. It's for lack of better terms, jumping in a cab that's going to drive you cross country. That's what it is. It's a cab on rails. And I was just as shocked as you when I read that yesterday. I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. They're federally subsidized on federal and privately owned railways, and there's no security measures in place.
Well, let me tell you something. Those train companies, I know for a fact, there's a lot of revenue generated by railway,
Absolutely.
a ton. So I don't know. It's just my thought that, and no one wants to be, groped and go through all the TSA shit that we always do at the airport. But I'll tell you what, every time I get mad, my wife and I remind each other when we're traveling at the airport, like, well, we know we're a lot safer than we were 20 years ago getting on a plane, and that's pretty obvious. But I don't know, that train part kills me.
It was shocking, man.
Just blows my mind. Yeah, I couldn't believe that part. So again, prayers and thoughts to the family and friends of those injured on this thing and killed. To the cops out there doing it every day, keep doing what you're doing. Life can change on you in a split second. Don't take it for granted. Keep training, preparing for that, but also take care of yourself afterwards. That's where we miss the mark a lot of times, is we don't take care of ourselves afterwards, and every day. And maybe not just on a high incident, but just every day. Try to find something you do that can help you relieve some stress and some anxiety, some anger. Take care of yourself, nutrition and health wise. Talk to someone. All of those things to keep you running and rocking. So I'm hoping to kick this one out tomorrow. Kurt, any parting words from the running man?
No, just a job well done for everybody that was involved yesterday.
Tragic loss aside, well done. Very proud to have worked in this city, worked in that agency, and worked with all of those folks. They kicked ass when time came and they needed them, and so I think we'll find out more as time goes on.
Yes, sir.
That said, that ends this episode of Talking Filthy Police Podcast. Take care of yourself. # put your mask on first. Peace.